In a highly anticipated ruling, the Wisconsin Supreme Court struck down the state's 1849 abortion ban today.
Our Wisconsin State Capitol Bureau Chief Vanessa Kelson breaks down lawmaker reaction and how the ruling will impact you.
This ruling is not a surprise given the makeup of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. The judges ruling 4-3, with all liberals ruling to repeal the 1849 abortion ban.
So we have the same abortion laws today as we did yesterday.
Britta Gadara, staff attorney at UW-Madison, says this ruling doesn't change abortion policy. It just provides more finality to a lower court's ruling to allow abortions.
The ruling today is that it answers this question that has been a little bit up in the air since Roe v. Wade was overturned.
The court's majority opinion says the past 50 years of laws passed to regulate abortions supersedes the near total ban outlined in the much older 1849 law. In her dissent, conservative Justice Rebecca Bradley writes, the liberal majority, quote, erases a law it does not like.
What the decision doesn't do is affect the state of the law going forward. So the legislature is free to pass other laws.
Senate Minority Leader Diane Hesselbein says after Wednesday's ruling, Democrats plan to do just that, propose new legislation to protect access.
This was a hard and fought-won victory for the state of Wisconsin.
Meanwhile, the state's Republican leadership.
I haven't had a chance to review it yet this morning. I've been working on some other things,
says they haven't decided on pursuing new legislation, but says this decision was an overreach.
It appears that once again the state Supreme Court liberals sort of went rogue and overturned legislative power.
This ruling means healthcare providers can continue to provide abortions in the state for up to 20 weeks after fertilization. But what this case doesn't clarify is whether or not there's a constitutional right to abortion. From the Wisconsin State Capitol, Vanessa Kelson.
And our team coverage continues with WMTV's Cameron Kelly. And Cameron, you talked with pro-life and pro-choice organizations today.
That's right. Pro-choice organization Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin was at a press conference this morning discussing the ruling and what it means to have access to abortions. Pro-Life Wisconsin shares their organization's goals and the impact of this decision.
This is a moral issue. We feel they've made a devastating decision, which will have devastating consequences.
There isn't a politician who knows better than the individual, and so that's why this is just critically important.
Abortion is now legal in Wisconsin, years after Roe versus Wade was overturned in 2022. Clinics like Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin returned to providing abortions in late 2023 after a county judge ruled the 1849 ban was invalid.
For about 15 months, people in this state were unable to access any abortion care, and so most people were accepting that very narrow exception of life-saving, which, as again the doctor described, a lot of uncertainty about the sort of line.
Pro-Life Wisconsin opposes this ruling and says they will continue the fight to outlaw abortion without exception.
There are other things that we are doing with legislation. Maybe we can talk about that sometime. There's stuff in the hopper right now that we're pushing.
Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin serves more than 50,000 patients.
This means that they can access the care that they need, that they can make decisions about their lives and do that in consultation with their doctors.
Pro-life leaders share the organization's goals moving forward.
Well, certainly it's to ban abortion without exception in the state of Wisconsin. It's also to pass a personhood amendment, right? Enshrining the right to life in our state constitution, providing equality of all human beings before the law.
Now, during the ban, some Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin staff traveled across state lines to work and expand care in Illinois. Live in the studio, Cameron Kelly, WMTV 15 News.